welcome! I'm participating in another one of Dena Tollefson's fantastically fun art challenges. This one is the Great Pumpkin Challenge. You can check out Dena's channel by clicking the link in the top right hand corner of this video. Her channel is full of gorgeous paintings and lots of helpful tips for all sorts of artists. So I'm sure you'll have a fabulous time when you go and visit. And the other thing that's very fun to explore is the playlists that Dena puts together for these challenges. It's one of the things I like best about participating is going to have a look at the playlist and seeing what an amazing variety of different artworks are produced all from the same prompt. You can do that too by finding Dena's playlist or by clicking on that hashtag Great Pumpkin Challenge. The prompt for this challenge is obviously pumpkins or something pumpkin coloured, and I've gone for a basket bursting with gorgeous pumpkins. They are the most fantastic colours and shapes, aren't they? So I've moved the basket off to the side a little bit to give us a bit of an interesting composition, and at this stage I haven't really decided whether I'm going to leave white space in the background or not, so we'll have to see later on. Those are the sort of decisions I am making while I'm actually painting. And the colour of the challenge is obviously this glorious orange. Isn't that fabulous? If you didn't love orange before, surely you've got to now. So I am putting in those orange segments with my favourite orange in my palette. But the other thing that's very interesting is the shadow colours that I'm going to have to include with the pumpkins. I normally put purple in everything, and I do love it with the orange, but I think today I'm going to use this colour that's called Indian Red. It's a very interesting paint because it has such strength. It does tend to really whoosh across any wet surface quite madly. So I'm going to use a fair bit of that. That's it going in at the bottom there. It's nice and dark and it's not very transparent, so it's perfect for those shadowy areas. So far I'm using all my tones of orange that I've got there. I've got the vibrant translucent orange, then that was a bit of burnt sienna that went on top of that, and then the dark shadowy areas is that lovely Indian red. And you might have seen in the beginning I put a bit of wax resist down to catch those highlights. The light is coming in from the top there and catching those top edges of the pumpkins, and that's why I am a little bit tempted to put in a background, because if you've left a little white edge on the top of your subject, the only way you're going to be able to actually see it and really appreciate it is if you've got a strong background to kind of show up that white edge. So I like the idea of white space, and I haven't done a white space background for a while, so that's where I'm hoping to stay, but I'll have to see whether I'm satisfied that there's enough of those highlights or not. That front pumpkin I decided would be a bit paler, so that's one of my, I think that's probably a cad yellow or something like that, with the translucent orange as the shadow shape. And then some of these pumpkins in the basket are upside down, and some are right way up, and they're not perfectly round, they're all lumpy and bumpy, which is rather wonderful. So I'm kind of going pumpkin by pumpkin, and I'm not bothered at all when something like that happens and the one colour swooshes into another, you know, the one pumpkin blends into another, because that's really doing some of my job for me, because the colour of the one pumpkin is going to reflect into the pumpkin behind it. So I'm very happy for some of those colours to share themselves across pumpkins. But I will have to think about how to separate those two pumpkins. I'm going to have to probably wait until that's dry before I can think about doing that. Now the stems as well, they're going to have that same issue with the highlight, where it's okay for the pumpkin stalk that's in the middle there, that one I'm painting now, because we have the top edge of the pumpkin that's going to trap in my highlight. At the moment it's too thick, so we'll have to fix that. But some of those others that are going into the background, it's going to be hard to see that highlight edge without a background colour to sit against it. But I think we probably will just live with it, and I like to add in more than one colour. I think it's a little bit boring if you just use one colour in an area, so I'm using that Indian red along with the deep dark green that I've used for the stalks, just to add a little bit of texture and interest and extra shadow to those stalks. Now for the basket itself, I want to make sure that I've left enough time for those pumpkins to dry, because I don't want to spoil too much of those beautiful vibrant oranges with the dark colours I'm going to use in painting the basket that's holding these pumpkins. So I'm going to leave the rim, and I'm going to move to that the sort of wooden bit underneath, and I'm going to use my lovely dark, see that's that Indian red. It's really quite opaque, and it does spread itself out rather marvellously. I'm using a piece of paper that's slightly bigger than 8 by 10, so I've kind of drawn out a rough border for myself so that I know if I were to frame it roughly where that frame was going to sit. So you may be able to make out a vague pencil line. I can certainly see it. It's a little bit tricky on the video. And again, I've repeated some of the colours from the pumpkins in that basket because I think it's very boring if you just have the one colour. So that's burnt sienna in with the Indian red there. Now this is where I've got to be patient, which isn't my strong suit, so it's a matter of checking the sheen on that paint, because while it's shiny you can tell that it is still wet, and I don't want to paint the rim while it's wet because I think it's a metal rim that's going around the top of this basket, and I think I'm going to repeat the colours that I've used. I don't want to introduce any others at this stage. So while I'm waiting for that base to dry, I am taking my Indian red and putting some more of the shadow areas in and around those pumpkins to show that they're really sitting in the basket. And when I'm picking up the page there, that's me checking the sheen on the paper. Now once I've decided I'm brave enough to risk it, that the bottom is dry enough, I want to put a little bit of water in so that my paint spreads out and gives those lovely watery effects that make me love this medium so much. And I'm going to use the colour that I used on the stalks because I don't want to introduce anything different at this stage. And that's Perylene Green. It's one of my favourite darks. So again, there's a lovely highlight on the top of that rim. So I want to try and trap that in there by having the dark edge, that's that lovely green colour, on the one side, and on the other side it's going to be the shadowy area that's the inside of the basket. And with that Perylene Green, if I can get it to slightly overlap the Indian red underneath, that's going to give me that effect of the shadow that's cast by that rim there. You can see that happening there. Just the paint is kind of doing the work for me. How terrific is that? Now to do the shadow side, I'm turning the paper upside down because it's a little bit easier for me to paint towards me, and I decided that that lovely Indian red was my shadow colour. So I'm running a little bit of that around, and remember I had that problem of separating those pumpkins there. I'm just running a little bit of that across the edge and then softening it off with a clean damp brush just to separate those two and to show the shadow. I think in hindsight probably should have been a bit bolder with that shadow and that colour, but overall those look like happy little jolly pumpkins. And one of the ways to see whether you think your painting is finished is to pop a frame in it. It does make quite a difference. I'm still trying to decide whether to put a background in or not. I think I'm going to call it done. What do you think? Thanks for watching. See you next time.